Hello, class. It has been a pleasure serving with you this semester and learning more about cultural humility, cultural awareness, and it was a joy to complete this cultural immersion project. This is my video discussion thread related to my cultural immersion project. The subject or my subject matter was homelessness or homeless individuals and families. My name is Sade Shepperson, and this is COUC or Couch 504 Multicultural Counseling. So the first part of the Immersion project was heavily centered around research. There were four key elements. The first was to identify and to learn more about the intra-group characteristics and inter-group characteristics, meaning intra-group characteristics are characteristics that exist within a group. Like, for example, let's say you have a team, all the team members, the things you share in common. Inter or INTER group characteristics are those characteristics shared by other cultural groups or groups that the differences between the group that you're studying. For example, I was studying homelessness, so when I looked at intergroup characteristics, INTER, I compared homeless individuals or the homeless population to other cultural groups. Within the intra group or within the homeless population, I was able to identify that they shared some things in common. For example, this is like the number one. It may seem obvious, but they were unhoused or experienced housing insecurity. Another common characteristic among this population was financial hardship. That kind of goes without saying, but people do experience homelessness for different reasons. However, in my research, it was confirmed that a lot of people who experience homelessness at some point in their lives have also had a history of poverty. Another common element among these individuals was substance use and mental health disorders. I also want to be clear that these aren't comprehensive. There are other common characteristics, and not all individuals who find themselves unhoused share these things in common. With comparing homeless individuals or individuals who are unhoused, comparing that population to other cultural groups, I found that homeless individuals experience a shorter life expectancy. They are living significantly shorter lives than other groups, and that is really alarming. And they also have unmet health needs. The next slide, we're still going to go over the four key elements because, like I said, we're still going over some of the research. This research was so helpful for me to just build a foundation for the base of the rest of my essay. Some of the common attitudes, beliefs, and values that were shared among this population were that some people believe and have a perception that homelessness only affects other people or people like them or people of a certain minority or gender or some of that is evidence-based. However, homelessness can affect anybody. And another primary perception among or about this group is that there is only a need for housing. Jackson et al. 2024 and Kerman et Sturbiopoulos 2024 both confirmed that housing is the primary need. However, it's not the only need. A lot of these individuals, like I mentioned in the last slide, have unmet health needs, such as they need to have their substance use addressed, some have mental health disorders, others have medical issues that remain unchecked. So those two are the two most common attitudes and beliefs regarding this cultural group that I found during my research. Key historical events and figures that affect this population. Hurricane Katrina in 2025 was significant. Some of the resources I used concerning, my research about the historical significance and events and people concerning this issue, some research was from Aller Grant and Sleet 2021 and Corey et al. 2022. So, as I mentioned, Hurricane Katrina was significant. A large number of people within the United States migrated and left Louisiana. As a result, they settled in other areas, creating more urgency, a more need for affordable housing, and it was just a major event, and it impacted a lot of people and contributed to the problem of homelessness we have today. Another significant event that is more recent, you might remember, and most of us have, lived through and had experience with, is the COVID-19 pandemic, which continues to have aftershocks. Responses from two key figures that I highlighted in my essay were from the Trump administration and Biden administrations. And so both of them have been really responsive and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic in different ways. However, I will say the homeless individuals, like a lot of us in 2020, we weren't familiar with this this epidemic, this virus. It was something new. And so I will say the homeless individuals, especially in 2020, according to my research, were very vulnerable because there was not an immediate response in action. For example, homeless individuals, because of the lockdowns, didn't have access to bathing stations anymore, much less a public toileting station. It became an immediate health crisis, even more so among that population. The next slide, I'm talking about history, patterns of immigration. So this is kind of like homelessness obviously is a broad issue. And so for the purposes of my essay, I tried to narrow it down some as far as the immigration patterns in history. I solely focused my research on understanding why a lot of homeless individuals are now settling or camping, whatever terminology you want to use, in suburban areas when in the past they always settled in cities, near metropolises. According to my research, especially Zhang et al. 2021, a lot of people are migrating to suburbs instead of cities now, and even homeless individuals, because affordable housing is a crisis everywhere. But the concern, according to the research, is that these homeless individuals are migrating to areas where they don't have transportation access, much less easy access to health needs, such as social services and medical facilities that do not require insurance. The historical and current oppression. The main thing I want to discuss on this slide is some research I found from Kebe and Evans 2025. It's very recent. There was a 2024 ruling by the Supreme Court that now allows for certain municipalities or certain local governments to sanction homeless individuals for sleeping in public spaces. For me, especially as a social justice advocate, as an aspiring counselor, but more importantly, as a human and as a Christian, it was just very concerning for me that now we're moving toward criminalizing homelessness and poverty through some of these policies. It was just a lot of research. I'm not going to go into everything in detail, but I will say I would encourage you to do your own research and learn further about this topic. My personal opinion is that, of course, I'm a child of Christ, like we all are, and we all deserve housing. I feel like that's a fundamental right. And to criminalize poverty and criminalize homelessness, I feel like we're moving in the wrong direction to address this issue. The next slide, I'm talking about research or two treatment approaches that could address this problem. Both of these have been proven and are effective. They're evidence-based. The first solution I want to discuss is the housing first model. The housing first model focuses on stabilizing housing needs first. Typically, before the housing first model was implemented first in Canada, the treatment first model was approached. And I'll just briefly explain a difference between the treatment first and housing first model. As I mentioned in a previous slide, a lot of individuals who are homeless, they have other issues such as substance use, mental health disorders, other needs that needs to be met. And so the treatment first focuses on, let's get your substance use under control. Let's control your mental health symptoms, for example, and then we'll find you housing. There's benefit to that. However, when the housing first model was implemented, we did see research found that was the housing first model is also effective, meaning we want to place you first, and we're still going to work concurrently, and and for a long period after, once you're placed, to get your substance use and your other needs met, such as related to health. However, housing individuals keeps them stable. For me, I just don't I personally, found difficulty with the treatment first model. The focus of my research was the housing first model, but I personally have found difficulty with the treatment first model because I do not understand how individuals who remain unhoused can get their substance use and other needs checked, like get them in order, because I feel like housing is just a basic need that needs to be mitigated first. And of course, we went over the multi social justice competencies, MSJCC. In this slide, I researched Ping et al. 2020 and Singh et al. 2020. And so one of the things that the competencies require us future counselors to do is to have a knowledge base and to advocate for others. And the housing first model, I feel like, is a good step forward that is evidence based. The next treatment approach I want to highlight is permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is housing for homeless people or individuals who are have housing instability, and oftentimes they have substance use, disability, mental health challenges, things of that nature. And so the permanent supportive housing is slightly different from just housing first. Both of those models house the individuals and address their needs. However, supportive housing doesn't just house you and then refer you to outside services. They remain with you, check in with you. They come in the home in a lot of these programs frequently, if sometimes daily, but at least weekly, and check on these individuals until they can become fully independent, not just in housing, but also with meeting their own health needs. The two events that I attended to research this further for the Cultural Immersion project was the clothing distribution. So in that event, I was a personal shopper at a clothing distribution for people who were housing unstable, had they needed housing, and some of the individuals were homeless. So it was such a joy and a ministry to assist these people with, clothing themselves in dignity and righteousness. Not only, of course, the outer garments, but the Bible says that God looks at the heart and the man looks at the outward appearance. And so I just used it as a ministry, but it was so enlightening to speak to some of these individuals and also practice humility myself and gratitude like they did. Another event that I attended to explore more about the homelessness issue was I attended a panel. They were actually planning an event a few months down the road. It hasn't occurred yet, but I attended the panel of community members to discuss the housing issue and also food insecurity in my area. I'm a Virginia resident. And so that was really helpful because on the panel they had two individuals who were formerly homeless. They also had other community members and leaders who really enlightened us, and we all just left, feeling like this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and we all, meaning all society members, need to be a part of the solution. Okay, three key things I learned about the culture as a result of attending those events is that housing is not their only need. Homelessness can happen to anyone, and it is also a local issue. My interview was conducted with Miss Johnson. She was formerly homeless. Also, she had experienced chronic homelessness. A little bit about her background. She was 45 at the time of my interview, a single parent. She had been divorced, and she had some different events that contributed to her homelessness. But I will say, it was a joy to like hear her story and learn more about her, to just expand my knowledge base and make, basically make the issue jump off the research page and go beyond the journal articles I was researching and make it a real life tangible problem by interviewing someone with who had experienced it. The interview, the cultural events for the person. So this person had interacted with other cultures and had experience of racially motivated or employment discrimination. After they first became homeless, they did look for a job and they did mention that they had difficulty with other groups. Key cultural events with the person. I really enjoyed when she told me about how much she celebrates Thanksgiving. She has been housed now and stable in housing for 8 years since her last episode of homelessness. And I really believe and prayed with her after the interview that will continue, and she will continue to prosper and she will never return to homelessness. But she mentioned how she loves to cook elaborate dinners and it's just such a joy to have her own home to cook again. She also mentioned that Mother's Day, she still sometimes gets sad because she did have a background of losing her mother at a young age. She also felt like that contributed to some of her issues that led her into poverty. The interview expanded my knowledge base by helping me understand that children and families are also impacted by this issue. For example, she had two small children at the time when she first became homeless. The three insights I learned from the interview were that people experience homelessness for different reasons. Homeless people can be children, and to become an effective counselor, I need to educate myself and act to make an impact. The clinical applications with diverse clients. First thing we could do as counselors, I'm speaking to myself and also you, but conferences and mentorships, we can learn more about it. The more we learn, the more we can know and identify ways that we can act how when we counsel our clients on any level, when we advocate for policy changes or any scope, and even in prayer, we can we can advocate in prayer. And so for me, learning more about the issue is the key. And then cultural awareness is a clinical application I took away from this immersion project, was that I need to understand not only about the homeless population, about my own cultural identity and others' cultures, because like I feel like learning more about this issue helps to enlighten me about the ways I can learn, be a learner from my clients. I'm not the expert; they're the expert in their experience, and practice cultural humility. And lastly, I want to leave you with that this is not an issue for other people. Homelessness is everyone's responsibility to address. And I really appreciate that. The last few slides are references. Thank you. It was a joy working with you all this semester. I look forward to continuing in this cohort.